Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 100 of
Woo,
Talk More
woo.
Talk, a solo Beatles video cast. And wow, what a celebration. We've got a bunch of fans here ready to ask us their opinionated questions. As we did on our 50th episode of Talk More Talk, we did Rack Our Brains, and we're doing the same here for our 100th. And but first, before we do all that, we're going to introduce ourselves and do a little backstory, if you will. And my name is Tom Hunyadi, and hopefully you know me from our other show, Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. And man, this has just been a thrill of my life to be able to do this show with my three colleagues, actually four, because every once in a while we get to see Ken Womack as well, but we'll talk about him in a second. But back in 2012, I discovered a show called Things We Said Today, and I was introduced to a man named Ken Michaels. Ken, how are you doing?
I'm great. Can't believe this is show 100 already.
It's a show 100, and you know, uh, Ken is very passionate about the Beatles and the solo Beatles, and after discovering his show and other shows like when they was Fab and something about the Beatles, and I've got a Beatles podcast and many more. The good thing about those shows is they're all great, but not but they center around the Beatles, and sometimes they do shows about the solo Beatles as well. And a few years later, I started Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, just out of kind of like a little bit of frustration that there wasn't really a lot of chat about solo Beatles. And Ken, I can't believe this, but December 23rd, I went back and I found the message that I sent you on December 23rd, 2017. And here, I got the message right here. And let's see here. Where is it? Of course, I don't have it up. But it says, Ken, what are your thoughts about on doing an all solo Beatles podcast?
Mm.
I'm thinking maybe a show where we discuss all things solo music. I'm thinking about asking Kit as well. Maybe one more person, a four-person show. I don't know, just thinking out loud. And then your response was, well, I'd be interested in it, but we'd have to talk about it maybe after Christmas. And we did.
Christmas.
And and when we were talking, because like I said, I wanted to have Kit on there, but I didn't realize, because I wanted this as well, you were talking about doing a video show too. So not only did you want to do a show with Kid O'Toole as well, which was the plus, and then you wanted to do the video aspect of it as well too. And I just thought, man, Ken is just hitting, on all, just it's so good when you have somebody that's on the same page with you, and wants to do something that you want to do as well. So Ken, what were your thoughts on doing an all solo Beatles show?
Oh, I'm totally for it. The one thing that's most important is that all the Beatles music, group and solo, is talked about.
Right.
Nothing should ever be ignored.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember at the time, because on a lot of podcast shows were now becoming video shows.
Right.
And on Things We Said Today, we were staying an audio show, and I was kind of pushing for us to enter the video world. And Alan was a little bit shy of being on camera, and he said, what is the benefit? People will just hear the same things that we're saying anyway, only on screen. But he started getting used to it from being invited on other shows, and then all of a sudden we became a video show. But yeah, I mean, I love talking about the solo Beatles, probably more than talking about the group. Because I love the fact that there's so much out there to explore. Right. There's 4 times as much music from the solo Beatles as what they did as a band. And so much of that were commercial successes and artistic successes. And, I noticed over the years with my background in radio, radio only plays a certain amount of music from any artist. As the years go on, that playlist gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And there's very little of the solo Beatles that you'll hear on commercial radio, aside from core hits from mainly the 70s at this point. Right. Treasure trove of all this other music that followed, as well as all the great music of the 70s. And so, yeah, totally, I was for it. And I remember saying to you, because you were listening to my live radio show of every little thing, I said, I've always had the idea if there was ever going to be a solo Beatles podcast, call it Talk More Talk.
Talk.
It's
There
the
you go.
perfect title,
It is.
like it was handed to us.
Right.
So,
Very true.
Completely for it.
Yep. Yeah. And then while we were talking, then you agreed to message Kit O'Toole, and here she is, the queen of all Beatles media, the queen, Kit O'Toole. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Oh, thank you.
So
doing great.
So you know,
thank you.
You were guesting on a lot of podcasts at this time. What were your thoughts about actually being a part of one once Ken messaged you?
Oh, I was thrilled. I wanted to do it. I love being on different podcasts, and I was just so excited to finally be on one. I really wanted to talk about, and solo. I was very excited to be able to talk about that, because much as I love talking about the Beatles, I mean, who doesn't? I thought this was a really interesting opportunity to be able to talk about this subject, because there were some particularly at that time, there were some solo ones out there, but not as many. And so to have this opportunity to do a podcast on all 4 solo careers, I just thought that was really exciting. And then what a plus to be able to talk about it with you, Tom, and Ken. I mean, I thought, this doesn't get any better.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. So it was the 3 of us at first, and then we were deciding, because we agreed that make it a 4-person show. And then you, Kit, suggested Ken Womack.
Yeah, I thought he would be a great fit. And at that time, he wasn't quite as busy
right.
as he eventually got.
Right.
Nobody anticipated, including him, how busy he would get. So at the time, he was like, this sounds great. Let's do it, for the same reason that he thought it would be great to have a podcast about the solo years. Right.
Because like you said, he became very busy. I think we were fortunate to have him for, I think, at least the first 8-10 episodes. And then, as we know, I mean, we've got what? Solid State. We've got the Harrison Clapton book. We got the John Lennon book, and then we got the one he did with you, Fandom in the Beatles. So, and then obviously the Mel Evans books that we all are discussing. Can't wait for.
George Martin books.
Yeah, the George Martin books,
and the George Martin books.
All was doing conferences, and it just went on and on.
Yeah, so very understandable. But then we did a couple episodes on our own, and then we also decided, well, maybe we should have again a 4th person, and then us, following me and Mr. Mayo. We all agreed to ask him if he wanted to be a part of the show. And Joe, April 15th of 2019, I messaged you about coming on the show, and you were following our show at the time. You had mentioned that you liked the show, and then plus after seeing your channel for some time, you were a big solo Beatles fan, so that obviously that was the plus.
Yeah, you like the way you told me you liked the way I ripped up the Best to Play album cover. I don't know.
That was interesting. Yeah, but did you give it much thought about it? Were you excited about joining?
I was very excited about it. I mean, I love the Beatles, of course, and I love the solo Beatles. And as much as I love the Beatles, they do get played out. I mean, I can't listen to the Beatles every day, or maybe I can, but I don't. But the solo Beatles, they have a lot of interest to me, because it's not so played out.
Right.
There's 4 roads to explore. After you finish the Beatles, you got 4 other roads.
Right.
And I was excited because, Ken Michaels, I grew up. I'm not much younger than Ken, but just a couple of years, I think. But I did wind up listening to his show. DHA in Jersey, and I always found a lot of information. I'd go to the Beatle Fest, and he'd always be on the panels. And I would listen to other shows he was on. I'd say, I'd like to be able to talk to Ken. I'd like to be able to give my side of the story. And now here I am all of a sudden. And I thought that's an extra bonus. I mean, I would have done it anyway, but the fact that Ken was there was cool. And then Kit, I started learning more about Kit because, I hadn't known her very well. But Kit, you were doing other shows as well. And I was listening to you on other people's podcasts and things. And I said, sure, sign me up. I think it's great. First, I was a pinch hitter.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Remember?
right.
You called it a pinch. Like when if Ken Womack couldn't make it,
yeah,
then I would be the fourth guest. So
and it just
very
ended
happy
up being the fact that it was a pinch hitter. You were just you ended up staying. It was like no
reeled you in.
Yes, reeled you.
Oh no, and I appreciate you asking
Permanent.
me, and I love it.
So your first show, well, I should say first, our first show was September 12th, 2018, where we did discuss or we reviewed the Egypt Station, Paul McCartney's Egypt Station. Joe, your first show was April 22nd, and we did the humor of George Harrison, which it's a very fun show. Yeah, show 17, very fun
it was
show.
The first one I did. Yeah.
And then since then we've been full steam ahead, and then here we are to episode 100, and I want to thank everybody that's here right now for your opinionated questions for our Wrack Our Brains show. And is everybody ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ready.
So, all right. So we've got first up, Mr. Mark Zutkiff.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. The question I have for you to kick us off is one where, since we've got 4 hosts, you can each pick a Beatle and you can pick one or the other side of this question, which is, what, if anything, do you think each Beatle learned throughout their solo careers that changed their recordings or live performances as time went on? Or you can pick, what have other musicians learned from each Beatles solo career? Could be something about the songs, live performances, political activity, diet, positive, negative, anything. So
I'm lost.
Each host pick a Beatle and what either the Beatle learned from their solo career or what other musicians you think learned from their solo.
Okay. All right. Well, I got an order here, and we're going to go round table for each question. And I got Kit, you're up first.
Thanks, Tom. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, for John, I think other artists learned from him. I'll take that because I can really think right away that he really taught other artists about being honest, about being, absolutely truthful in their songwriting, in production too. I mean, really being just bare bones, hold nothing back. He absolutely, and particularly like the Plastic Ono Band album is the best example of this. I can't think of too many other artists at that time that were doing anything like that and really just laying themselves bare like that. I mean, it just, I can't think of anything. So I think that was something that other artists learned from him. For George, I think the fact that he was brave enough to put his spirituality front and center, I think is another thing. I mean, again, I don't think many other artists were doing that. And also bringing world music into the forefront. I mean, he was way ahead of his time there. And I mean, I think we talked on our show about things like the Bangladesh concert and, bringing in Ravi Shankar and exposing him to a wider audience. So certainly that's another thing that many artists learned from him. I mean, Paul Simon's Graceland, would that have happened without George Harrison's influence? Who knows? for Paul, gosh, I would say I'm not sure. I think it was just his, his gift of melody that I think really influenced other artists. And just his sheer versatility. I mean, that's I think that has inspired so many. And of course, and the Ram album is probably his greatest right now legacy in the solo years. So, because certainly so many, that's kind of one of the earliest indie kind of albums. And Ringo. Because he's great and everything. He's pretty versatile as well. I mean, look at how he has dabbled in everything from country to to standards. I mean, he did one of the earliest standard albums, come to think of it. I mean, look at how Rod Stewart followed and so many others. So, he's dabbled in a lot of areas that artists back then didn't do that. So I think they all in their own way influenced artists after them, for sure. So it's an interesting question, Mark.
Now, did you want us to do all four, Mark, or did you?
I can't even think of one by any of them.
I originally said pick a Beatle, but
okay.
You said all four.
Here for half an hour.
Well, Kit just answered for all four of us. So.
Yeah, I don't
Sorry.
have. I mean, what if you think of one, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of any, because it's basically what she said. You think of like honesty, maybe from John, maybe being more. I don't know, risky, taking more risks, maybe I'd say, I don't know.
Okay, Ken?
Man, I'd love to explore both sides of what you were asking there, but I think all four Beatles survived on their own, and while they were together, they were developing their own individual styles, and that got more solidified in their solo careers. They all learned how to produce very well, including Ringo, who co-produces with Bruce Sugar these days. And they all learned how to survive by themselves. Once in a while, a couple of Beatles helped each other out, but for the most part, they all carved their own paths, and they learned that, they can survive on their own. And, the mere fact, I know I go on a bit about the charts and all, if you take a look at the success that the four of them had, that's proof that they survived by themselves. And I think that they're, as much as they're proud of what they did as a band, they also know that they made it on their own, and they're proud of what they achieved on their own. Right. And even though Ringo's sales was short-lived through Goodnight Vienna, he's had a very successful career performing with the All-Star Band. And I think that Ringo has learned that, his identity is he loves to make music, he loves to record, he loves to go out and perform. It's a simple idea. He discovered that about himself, and he's living his dream that way. And even though his music is not cerebral and it's not groundbreaking, he's comfortable in his own skin, with what he's achieved and who he is. And I think, he's so much better for that as a person. And we could all learn from that, I think. But, I hope that answers how the rest of the world was affected by the four solo Beatles. That's a whole other,
right.
category, which Kid handled very well.
With other artists learning from a Beatle, I would say, with Paul, Kit mentioned the melody thing too, but I also think, people learn that they can do things on their own if they wanted to, take control of their own music. If they were able to do something like that, you look at other artists like Prince or David Grohl with the first Foo Fighters album, Neil Young. I mean, these artists can do an album all by themselves if they want to. And I think, seeing somebody like a Paul McCartney do it first and, and having success at it, and also, creative control at it, and I think that's something that a lot of artists got from them, and also giving back. Look at all the help that Paul McCartney gave other artists in the last 50 years. It's and you would hope that those other artists gave back as well, like Paul gave to them. So that would be mine.
And reinventing yourself.
Yeah.
Paul was able to overcome being in the Beatles and start all over again and reinvent himself solo with Wings and really take off.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we can admire the four of them for them doing what they wanted to do.
Right.
Mm-hmm. They followed their own dreams. They answered to themselves only, really, if you think about it. Paul McCartney does what he wants to do to this day.
Yep.
He still makes albums. He still tours. He ventures in different things, whether it's classical music or, I hope we get to see It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes.
Yeah.
We haven't heard a thing about that.
What happened to that?
Recently. But, these are people that we could admire for acting as independent as they have been and being successful at it.
Yeah. Okay. Mark, thank you very much.
Thank
we're
you.
going to move to Craig. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Great. What's your question?
Great. Well, greetings from Canada.
Okay.
So my question is, if you could take one Beatles or solo Beatles event to be a fly in the wall and oversee, just to see what really happened, what would you pick and why?
Interesting. Okay, Joe, you're first up.
Beatles or solo Beatles?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, to do it on the spur of the moment, because what comes into my head. I don't know. Maybe in light of recent events with the Get Back, maybe I'd like to be in the studio for the whole sessions and see the good and the bad and see really what the truth is. And we got a lot more stuff with Peter Jackson's documentary, of course, right? That let us know that it wasn't all gloom and doom like the Michael Lindsay Hogg movie portrayed. And now we're feeling like, it was kind of in the middle, although it was still inevitable. I think that they were having some problems and they're probably going to break up ultimately. But I want to get the truth. You talk about fly on the wall, right? Like,
not that 45 it came that with or the second disc that came with the Let It Be Naked.
Right. Not the greatest thing, but that if I really had more time to think, maybe I'd find some other ideas. But that was the first one that leapt out at me.
Okay, Ken.
This is kind of easy for me. If you're talking about live events, if anything, I wish I could have been there when the Beatles played at the Star Club. And the reason why I'm saying that is because unlike once they became famous and their shows were a half hour or less, the Beatles played in Hamburg for 7-8 hours a night.
Yeah.
And at the Star Club, that's when Ringo was in the band. So you would have seen the four of them. You would have seen the Fab Four. They would have played at all hours of the night. You would have heard how great a live band they were, doing all the songs they were doing at the time that they also would do, say, for BBC Radio later on, or the Decca Audition recordings, that material, mixing that with their new compositions at the moment. And that would have been fascinating, up until the wee hours of the night to see the Beatles,
Right.
A minute or a 40-minute set, then take a break, then come back in a few minutes, later and do another set. I'd rather see that than all the great historic Beatle concerts when they were famous.
Cool. I probably would I would love to go back to the Decca auditions, I guess, and just see their mannerisms. See if they were, how nervous they were, and their reactions to, their song, and see how they felt, whether or not they felt like they could do it better if they had one more opportunity. I just would have loved to just hear the chatter and the mannerisms of that session, because again they were clicking on all cylinders at this point, right? Live, they were doing great. And then now you're going into a different, different atmosphere and different feelings, different nerves are going on. something they just weren't used to doing. And just seeing their expressions and their feelings and all that. And that's what I would pick. Kit?
I would have loved to have been in the recording session of The End, to see that guitar, do the guitar, I guess, trio, them recording that, and Ringo doing his, drum solo that he didn't really want to do. But I mean, to see them just give it their all, knowing probably this was toward, the real end of their career, but just to be there in that atmosphere and just to hear them perform that incredible song. Yeah.
Excellent. Good pick, Kit. All right, Craig, thank you very much for your question.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Good to see you. And we've got the one and only Mr. Tony DeMeo. Tony, my friend, how are you? And what is your question?
Hello. There's a question I really need to ask you that somebody else asked at the fest this year, and that was Annie Nichols at a panel. Is there a topic in the Beatles' careers, solo or as a band, that you think should be the topic of a documentary in the future? What do you think should be covered in a documentary has been covered before, basically?
Now, is that Beatles or solo? Both?
Either, yeah.
Either? Okay. Ken, you're up first for this one.
Boy, it's great when you ask questions that you normally don't think about.
Yeah.
Tough one.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's going to be tough doing a documentary with just the people who are alive now, because you're missing so many valuable pieces of the puzzle there with John and George not there. I'd love to see something where they're really exploring the complexity of the end of the Beatles and why they broke up, because there are a lot of reasons why they broke up, and we can all give our opinions as to what the most important reason was, whether it was Alan Klein, whether it was John wanting to be with Yoko more and do all of his creative work with Yoko, that kind of stuff. But there's so many angles you can take with that. And I'd love for people to get a full understanding of what was going on. There's also all the problems they had with Apple, which wasn't just a record company. It was a whole conglomerate, and the Beatles weren't really businessmen. They hired friends of theirs who I'm sure to some degree did an admirable job, but they were basically musicians and creative songwriters and artists. And here they are with a company where they have a film company and they have a clothes division and, all these different reasons why the Beatles broke up, so that the public can understand what they were going through at the time. And you'd need somebody like Peter Jackson to do something like that, something that would be just as epic as Get Back, because that would take many hours to really explore. I don't know if it's possible without having John and George here, and you'd have to get, whoever who's left that's still alive, or family members, if they're willing to talk about it, or even if they were there at the time. It's going to be very difficult to do something like that.
Right.
But, there's so many podcasts out there that went into detail about Get Back and the documentary, and it's because it's so fascinating what the Beatles were going through in 1969. And that was just 1 month of it. So something more in depth, especially about 1969, would be great. Really exploring why they broke up.
Okay. I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna, be biased here. Stick with Paul here. Yeah, right. August, October of '73. I would love a documentary about the recording of Band on the Run. Now I know Paul has talked extensively about it, and Danny and Linda, but obviously there's we always can't rely on what they say. But I would love to somebody to dig in and just talk about do a documentary. I know there's some film footage of the sessions there, and talk about the mugging or talk about the influence of the music from there. Talk about Ginger Baker's involvement. And then see what we can see if there's any untruths there. And I know obviously we're going to get some of that from the McCartney legacy from Cozen and Sinclair. So can't wait to read about that. So that would be my pick. And then we move to Kit.
I would like to see more done on the Beatles' musical influences, because I think it's just astounding how many genres influence them. From R&B to country and so many others. And I'd like to see more work done on that, whether we're talking documentary, whether we're talking, some Mark just messaged me and said there's another class I can teach. Well, maybe, maybe. Because I mean, really, there's just so much out there, and the Beatles introduced us to some great, R&B artists that we didn't know about, or maybe not many of us knew. And I would definitely like to see some more work done on that, because I think there's some material that that really needs to be done. Some artists that perhaps have been unjustly forgotten. So yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
All right.
It's a great pick.
Yeah, very good pick, and maybe a future class, as Mark suggested. All right, Joe, what do you got?
How about a really good documentary on Ringo, his whole life? And I don't know whether you were talking like documentaries or we're talking about films like, a biopic or something like that. But I think Ringo, from the troubles he had and illnesses as a child, and then overcoming that and getting to play a drum in a hospital band and becoming so big in Liverpool with Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, becoming the most sought after drummer in his own right. And then eventually, with the Beatles, and later on the problems he had after the split, and his whole life struggle with alcohol and substance abuse, and then the triumphant overcoming of it. He's been sober since '88, and we all know Ringo, looked so good for 82, and and the whole story. I think there's a story in there. Ringo getting into the man, and really not just as the drummer, or
Right.
the funny clown, but all of it. I'd like to see something like that.
That's
Very
a good
cool.
point.
Yeah, I like that, Joe. Tony, thank you very much, my friend. It's good seeing
Thanks,
you again. And we're moving on next to Scotty. Oh, Scotty, how are you, my friend? You got to unmute yourself. There you go. Make this question easy because I'm first.
Yeah, the last one was easy, and I was last.
Yeah. Just kidding. But Scott, how are you? Welcome. And what's your question, my
Thanks.
friend?
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
All right, good. So with the whole Revolver box set coming out, and I'm a little annoyed that Magical Mystery Tour was just ignored. What would you guys like to see on a Magical Mystery Tour box set?
Magical Mystery. Well,
And also,
Okay.
I'm sorry. And also, would you guys like to see the Yellow Submarine songs included on it? Because they were kind of recorded
That
around
was
the-
my answer, Scott.
That
was one of my.
You know what? I would
Yeah.
just say leave Magical Mystery Tour alone. Leave that alone. Leave it as it is. I think you could, do a high def Blu-ray of the film. If you want to put that in there, you can. There's more demos, I would imagine, outtakes, first takes, whatever for that. I would love to hear that. I mean, I guess we're not going to get. When it comes with the Blu-ray with the 5.1, I don't know if they're going to just, utilize that for downloads only. I don't know if this is going to be a trend or not, but yeah, I think there's plenty to use. I mean, we got plenty on the Blu-ray that came out, what, 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
You know, so I would just like to see the film and the music put together. Maybe there's more music that George Martin. No, and I'm sorry, that's Yellow Submarine. But yeah, just stick with the music and the film, and I think that's plenty. Kit?
Yeah, I agree, and I think great point about the movie to restore it. Great, Blu-ray and because the copies that I've seen, and admittedly I don't look at it constantly, but some of them have been a little muddy. I think it is due for a remastering and so forth. So I would love that. I would absolutely love to see a remixing, perhaps of the soundtrack for that. That I would really like to see. And then, as you said, maybe a box set with that, and yeah, any outtakes. I will never turn that down. I am all about the outtakes. So if there would be anything like that, but other than that, yeah, I don't know if there's really would be anything else to add there, but
maybe the Hello Goodbye single.
Oh yes, of course, yeah, the Hello Goodbye single. Yes,
yeah, Carnival of Light finally.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, right. All right, Joe.
Maybe you're a rich man, all you need is love.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I don't know what I can add to it. I mean, the only thing is, I start thinking like, Magical Mystery Tour, was an EP originally, and but now it's recognized because of the Capitol album as the worldwide catalog canon title of the whole thing. With side 2 and all, but that's why I thought Yellow Submarine could go together, because not enough Yellow Submarine on its own. Maybe put them together musically. Musically, you can have all the outtakes, and you can have demos and anything. And home movies. There are home movies. We've seen a lot of them already. Making Magical Mystery Tour. A lot of footage of that. Outtakes, and I think Mal Evans, right, also had a trip with Paul, and around that era, which would be interesting. A lot of stuff really to put on there if they could. I wanted to, Yeah, I don't know what else to add as far as the quality goes, though. I mean, they did a good job on Magical Mystery Tour with the Blu-ray and DVD that we have already, and of course Yellow Submarine, as I'm throwing that in here, the song track that came out was so good in 1999.
Yeah, that was excellent. I don't know if you can improve on that.
Yeah, I like the idea of putting them together as one, unless you can get 2 fairly sizable packages for the money. If you can really beef them both up, do them separate.
Right. Okay. Very good. Ken?
Well, I was saying years ago that I envisioned the Magical Mystery Tour Yellow Submarine box set, because they deliberately left off the songs from Magical Mystery Tour and the 4 new songs for Yellow Submarine and the archival box sets for Sgt. Pepper and the White Album. And so to me, can't add too much to what you said already. I'd love outtakes of all the songs. You can do outtakes of everything from Magical Mystery Tour, including everything on side 2. And I don't know how they would handle Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields, since that was tackled already on Sgt. Pepper. Maybe they'd put in some other outtakes of those 2 songs. That would be nice. I really look at the movies themselves as separate releases. I'd like to see a remaster. Every 10 years or so, there should be a remaster of all these films anyway. So yeah, that and a Blu-ray by itself, not part of the package of an archival box set. And you could probably you'll get a remix, obviously, of Magical Mystery Tour, and a remix of, I guess, the 6 songs on side 1 of Yellow Submarine, and then all the outtakes. So you probably would get 4 CDs out of something like that. I'd be happy with that. Not only that, I was predicting this would happen because Bruce Spizer's books have always mirrored what's about to come out anyway. We have Bruce's new one on Rubber Soul and Revolver, so I guess that means Rubber Soul is next. But, who knows? But that's what I would see. I'm always about the outtakes first before
Right.
anything else.
Yeah.
So I'd be excited about that. That alone is enough to excite me.
Okay.
Be happy with.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What about Christmas Time Is Here Again? And you know my name, look up the
You
number.
know, I was thinking about the long version in great sound quality.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate you being here, my friend, and good seeing you
You
as
got it.
always. All right,
Thanks.
Mason, what's going on? Oh, can't hear you,
You're
buddy.
muted.
Can't hear you, buddy.
How about now?
Yes.
There you go.
There you go,
Okay.
buddy. That's your
I was
question.
apparent my mic wasn't working the whole time. So okay, I was just want to say thank you for having me on the show.
Sure.
Really appreciate this. Now I've been thinking a lot about the question here. What can I ask that the people before me hadn't already asked? So I'm just gonna go simple. Like this is one of the easiest questions that you could ask on a show like this. But I am going to stay true to the fact that this is a solo Beatles thing, not just the regular Beatles.
It's not a Beach Boys question, right?
No. That's for a totally different panel.
Yeah.
So if each of you had to pick one solo Beatles album to choose as your favorite or least favorite, and even a guilty pleasure, if you think they do have one, what would it be?
So you want us to answer all three of those, or do you just want us to pick one of the three, like our favorite, least favorite, or guilty pleasure?
You know, give your favorite, least favorite, and if
Okay,
you have a
so all
guilty
three.
pleasure.
Okay, cool. I got you. Kit, your favorite, least favorite, and guilty pleasure.
Okay, so one. Okay,
Yes.
I'm an idiot. So one.
that's all right.
So
Yes.
one. This is one Beatle, or
No. Just name your
Just in
favorite.
general.
Your just in general, your favorite, your least favorite, and your guilty pleasure album of the solo Beatles.
Got it. Okay. Oh gosh. Favorite. Oh, this is hard. This is so hard. I guess I would say All Things Must Pass is my favorite.
Mm.
Least.
Thumbs up for me.
Yep. All right. Okay. Good. I win your approval.
George is
All
my
right,
favorite,
so-
by the way.
All right. Least favorite. Oh boy. This is. Okay, you're gonna kill me. Sometime in New York City. That's probably my least favorite. I'm sorry, guys.
I
I'm
honestly
sorry.
don't blame you on that one.
I'm sorry. Guilty pleasure. I hate to say this is a guilty pleasure, but I guess because it gets so much hate, I'll have to say it. Press to Play. I love Press to Play.
Join the club. Join the
Yay!
club.
Okay. Thank you, Kit. Joe, your turn.
Yeah. The favorite was what I'm having the most trouble with the favorite. I don't know. Favorite depends on my mood, I guess. I'll go with All Things Must Pass. I think it's the best of the solo albums, really. If I had to pick one just to stand out. Least favorite. Now, after that Press to Play business, I'd love to say that because I don't like it. But no, there's one album I think, in addition to Press to Play, which is the least favorite. I'm cheating here, and Driving Rain, which is the least favorite. I'm going to use Ringo. Old Wave is going to be my choice for least favorite solo album, Old Wave, and it's going to be getting a reevaluation soon because it's going to be coming out for Black Friday Record Store Day. So we'll see how I feel about it then. Guilty pleasure. Yeah, guilty pleasure. I really don't feel guilty about this, but I'm going to say Back to the Egg, only because it didn't fare as well as Paul's other albums. Maybe some people think it's one of his lesser works. I like that it's a little harder direction. I'll call it a guilty pleasure or Off the Ground. A lot of people put that down. I like that too. Yeah. I noticed I didn't pick anything like Electronic Sounds. Or Two Virgins. Those are the easy answers for, least favorites and things. I just use the regular albums or original material,
Right.
Okay.
not
All right.
covers or anything.
Thank you, Joe. Ken, you're up.
Well, I've said it many times. My favorite album from any artist is Living in the Material World, because I do love the very spiritual side of George Harrison. And the songs on there are just so powerful. And I'm not taking anything away from All Things Must Pass. I have no problem with anybody calling it George's best or the best solo Beatle album, because as I've often said, the only thing better than one great album or two great albums, and that's what you have with All Things Must Pass. It's just that the songs on Living in the Material World touch me more. And what George is saying and the messages in his songs, I think, are very deeply personal. And sometimes I look at it kind of as his Plastic Ono Band, only in terms of what he's saying with his songs, not so much in, I mean, Plastic Ono Band was such a bare recording and very raw. And then there's a big difference between Phil Spector's production on All Things Must Pass to George's production on Living in the Material World. Although
And-
Try Some Buy Some was co-produced by Phil Spector. Right. But anyway, my favorite album from any of them, solo-wise, or from any artist, is Living in the Material World. Least favorite is very tough. And believe it or not, I'm actually going to say what Joe said, Old Wave. I love all of side one of Old Wave, but side two I think is kind of weak, especially to end with two instrumentals. As much as I like Going Down as the last song, but side two could have used a little bit more work. And I don't believe in guilty pleasures. I don't feel guilty about anything that I like. But if I have to pick something that's in that category, maybe Kisses on the Bottom. You know, I do like the arrangements of those songs a lot. And even though Paul's vocals are not what they were in the past, and he gave you his softer delivery, I think they work on those songs. And I love the two originals that he wrote on Kisses on the Bottom, especially Only Our Hearts, which I think it's a better song than My Valentine, tell you the truth. But yeah, those would be my picks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Ken?
excuse me. I'm going to change. I'm going to change my guilty pleasure, although I'm not guilty, to John Sometime in New York City. How did I forget that? Kid just mentioned it, and that's because it's obviously it's the most hated and reviled of
Well, it's one of the
John's
most
solo albums, and I
controversial
think
albums that's in their catalog.
quite enjoyable.
Okay.
Underrated.
Well, we'll all in agreement with George, even though we've got different albums. I'm going to go with All Things Must Pass as my favorite solo Beatles album. My least is the one, we did another listen on it. We all agreed that it wasn't as bad as critics and fans think it was, but for me, it's still, not as enjoyable as his other stuff, and that's Ringo the Fourth. I'm going with, and then my guilty pleasure, which is not guilty, but to some people it might be considered a guilty pleasure, and that's Buku's the Blues. Love that album by Ringo. So that being said, Mason, thank you very much for your question, my friend. Good seeing you.
And thank you for allowing me to ask.
Yes, very good. See, it's tough when we're put on the spot for those very specific. What is your favorites? Answer now.
And
hard,
if
right?
I could just add one more thing, it's that I'm genuinely surprised that, because George is my favorite Beatle, before that for most of y'all's picks for favorite solo Beatle album, it was a George album. So I was genuinely surprised by that.
Cool. All right, excellent. Mason, thank you again. Mike, what's going on, buddy? Unmute yourself and please, good to see you again. And
hello.
What is your question, bro?
My question is sort of Beatle related, but maybe Beatles in the 80s and 90s. And it's kind of like a Marvel alternate universe what if.
Okay.
I'd like to hear from each of you.
Okay.
If we didn't lose John Lennon in 1980, and I'm going to give two scenarios of things that could have happened, and I want you to pick one. That you can only pick one. So the options are the Beatles reunite and play a 1 hour set at Live Aid. It goes over pretty well. People like it. The other option is about 10 years after 1980, the Beatles all get together with John Lennon, of course, and do the anthology, 10 parts, and they interview and they talk and they do pretty much what we got, but Lennon's a part of it. Would you rather have the 1-hour concert or a 10-hour documentary with all of them?
Oh boy. All right.
Ooh.
Joe, you are
can only pick
first.
one.
Joe, you're
Thank
first,
you.
buddy.
Oh,
Thank
Joe.
you. Well, I gotta say, it's a good question, Mike, by the way. And when he first mentioned it, I was loving, Live Aid. Oh, that sounds fantastic. But then when he mentioned doing an anthology with John and them all together and talking, and which might include some jamming too, if we go by, what we saw in the first one when you had
Good point.
Paul, George, and Ringo doing
Yeah.
Blue Moon of Kentucky, right, and stuff. I think I'd go with the anthology. I think, and I think there'll be more of it, more
Right.
than just an hour. Boy, because I think that would. I don't know. Wow, that's a tough one, but I'm gonna stick with it. The anthology. Just think it would be cool having John reminiscing and all of them together in some shots in the studio talking, and maybe George Martin in the studio with them playing with the levels on the monitor and stuff. I think wow, I get really excited hearing that, thinking about this. Well, too bad it can't be.
Right.
But yeah, that's my
Okay.
choice.
Very good. Ken?
Thank you, Mike, for making this a very easy question for me. I would definitely go with the Beatles anthology. As much as I love the anthology, the way it came out, I think it does lack something because there's not enough of John when it comes to interviews. And everything that John said, obviously, they were older clips. It would have been interesting to hear John's point of view in 1995, just like the other Beatles were interviewed at that time. And for years I used to say the Beatles would never reunite and do any new material, but the fact that the three of them did get together with John's songs for the Beatles anthology made me change my opinion that maybe for that particular purpose there might have been a few new songs, brand new songs, with the four of them, regardless of who wrote it. So that thought has entertained me, as well as jamming like we saw the three Beatles do on the Beatles anthology. But I think it would have been forget about the new music and all. I think it would have been a much more balanced documentary if there was more of John in it. I didn't feel there was enough of John from the interviews in the anthology. There's so much more of Paul, George, and Ringo. And and I love the three of them, there's no doubt about it, but you needed it to be a bit more equal. And maybe John's opinions in 1995 would have been different than something that he said in 1980 or in the 70s.
Or be sure of it.
So John always changed his opinions, but it really needed that. And then you would have the music as a bonus. And I really do think they would have done, if they did the two new songs, Free as a Bird and Real Love, I think they would have done something entirely new. Maybe just a couple of songs, but I'd rather have that than a live concert.
Right. I hear you, and I agree. I agree with Ken and Joe. I'm also going to pick the anthology for the sole purpose of the fact that, like Ken said, John's opinions and Joe, his opinions changed. When he did speak, I mean, he was speaking what he was thinking then at that particular moment throughout when we did get to hear him. So we didn't get an updated opinion from him, which was a damn shame. So yeah, I'm going with the anthology as well. And Kit?
You guys have convinced me. When I first heard it, I thought, a concert? Are you kidding me? That to hear them do a set live? But yeah, I mean, now that I think of it, I absolutely, because it's true that the anthology did suffer without hearing John's full perspective. And obviously they had to work with what they had, with the interviews that they had of his. And of course, to hear his full perspective, and then, what could they have done recording new material. I mean, can you imagine? So I think I agree. I think probably the anthology with John would have been the best.
Yep. Excellent. So unanimous there, Mike.
I predicted that all four of you would go with the anthology.
I came close. I came
my choice
close.
too. That's my
Yeah,
choice
but,
too, because the hopes would that they'd play together in it, and
Very
but
good.
Mike, if it said a tour, just 1 year, like maybe like just for one tour, with multiple dates and everything, that might be a little different. I don't know.
then you change it to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe.
There you go.
Maybe you change it to that. Nice. Mike, thank you very much. It's
Thank
always
you.
good to see you, my friend.
Hmm.
Take care. All right. Call me Mr. Broadstreet. Ed Crawford. Woo! What's going on, buddy? How you been?
Well, doing good. Just a quick shout out, Ken, Joe, and Robert. Good to meet you guys and see you. Got my best autograph here. I never travel without my Broad Street record bowl here.
There you go.
Oh boy.
Oh, Sally.
Is this going to be a Broad Street question? I wonder.
No, actually, not a Broad Street question. It's kind of
okay.
It's kind of a little bit similar to Mason's question, but it's not really like a favorite album, something like that.
Okay.
Here's what I'm thinking. So, and this is for everybody. This is for all four Beatles. So, what would you consider the last classical album for each Beatles? So, in other words, this is where the classical period of the career ends, and then the modern part of their career begins.
So the last classic, not classic.
Yeah,
classic.
Sorry.
Classic.
Yeah.
Classic.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
their last album we would consider a classic.
Right, and then this is where the kind of the more modern period begins, depending on
So assuming that you don't think that any of their modern stuff we wouldn't think is a classic.
I guess so. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just kind of.
I'm just trying to get. Okay.
Where's that line go?
Where does the line? So where's the line draw? Where do you draw the line on their last classic album? And who was last time? Was it Ken? Were you last? Were you first last time?
Nobody wants to go first.
No,
was last, I think.
No, Kit. Well, yeah. So Joe, you're first on this one. That's right.
Wait a minute, I went first last time.
Yeah, he did. He went first
Okay,
last time.
Ken. What? So you want Ed? Do you want us to do for all four or just one?
I'd say all four. Just like a quick, round table.
Yeah. What was their last classic album for all four? Okay, Ken. The last classic.
Which you feel was the last classic? And then, exactly.
All right, George.
The last album they released.
Don't be a Weisenheimer, Joe. I would go with Brainwashed. I think Brainwashed was an excellent album and very underrated. As much as I love Cloud 9, there's so much great material all throughout. Brainwashed, I'd definitely go with that. I love most of Paul's modern stuff, but as far as what I consider a truly great album, the last really great album he made is Chaos and Creation, in my opinion, because it is much more simply produced. A lot of people prefer that these days from him than trying to sound modern. Very powerful songs, very personal songs. He's bearing his soul quite a lot. Very dark album. I would definitely go with that. There's such gems on there. I mean, Jenny Wren, it's one of his best songs in his solo career, as far as I'm concerned. Too Much Rain, songs like those. John, I would go with Double Fantasy. I do love Yoko's stuff on there too. And songs like Woman and Watching the Wheels are among the best songs of his solo career, period. And I love I'm Losing You, and the edginess of that, and Beautiful Boy is gorgeous. Ringo, I do like the stuff that he's done post Mark Hudson, but I still think his strongest period was the Ringo album, Time Takes Time, and the first three albums with Mark Hudson. So then I'd have to go with Choose Love, which has, it has a lot of Beatle sounds, Beatle production behind it. And that was Mark Hudson's influence. Ringo obviously approved it. But the songs on all those albums with Mark Hudson, except for Liverpool 8, are really strong. So I would go with those.
Okay. For me, real quick, I totally agree with you, Ken, on Chaos and Creation. I think that is his last, if you want to call it classic / masterpiece. Totally agree with you there. I would go Time Takes Time with Ringo. For me, Cloud9 for George. People, poo-poo on that Jeff Lynne production. I still don't get it why they do that. But hey, that's your opinion. And the last, what I would say classic John album, and I want to say John album, and I'm not including Yoko, I'm going to go with Walls and Bridges. Yeah, I think that's some of his best work. And too bad he didn't he stopped doing new music after that, because we know that we got rock and roll after that. But would love to have seen a follow-up album of new music after Walls and Bridges. So that's mine. Kits, how about you?
Yeah, and I'm going to go with classic, meaning like consistently good album. Yeah. Exactly. So Ringo, Time Takes Time. George, I'm going to go with George Harrison. I think that was, I think I'm going to go with like consistently, good. Let's see. Then Paul, Chaos and Creation, absolutely. And John, Walls and Bridges. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Very good. Joe, you've had time?
Yeah. All right. Well, the thing is, let's start with John. Okay. At first, when I was thinking of this, I'm not thinking like Kit says, or consistently good necessarily. Like I love the self-titled George Harrison album all the way through, but I don't think that's a classic. I guess we have different ideas what we think are classic. With John, I was gonna say Imagine originally, and then I thought a little bit more about it, and I thought, no, Double Fantasy, is a classic album. Because it actually has so many classic songs now. We think of it, Watching the Wheels and Woman and Beautiful Boy are all, those three alone, some of John's best work ever. At the time when that album came out, I was just a teenager. I didn't really think much of it. I was a little disappointed, actually. Now I think they're great as an older man, But, if you want to say, well, an album without Yoko involved in it, then I'd probably put Imagine, but I'll go with Double Fantasy overall.
Okay.
And one thing I want to say, Walls and Bridges, one of my very, 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 very favorite John albums. I just don't think of that as classic for me. I don't know why. I mean, whatever classic means, when we talk about it. Paul, I got to go along with Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. I think, I've loved just about everything Paul's been doing forever. I love New, Memory Almost Full. I love that in Annie's, I see background, Memory Almost Full down over there.
Oh yeah.
But Chaos is something about it. I think because for me, it just has Paul, as I say, very vulnerable, very deep. His feelings, bearing his soul more. I always say, to me, it's the closest he came to, say, John Lennon, Plastic Ono Band. So that's why I really like that a lot. For George, I went with Cloud9 as the last really, great classic album of George. I don't understand either the Jeff Lynne gripes from people, but you either like something or you don't. Everybody has a subjective taste, and some people just don't like that sound of the 80s and drums and sounds and things like that, machines or whatnot. Sometimes when We Got My Mind Set on You is a little too robotic for some. I don't know with the drum sound or whatever. But anyway, that's it. So we got my choices there.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Time takes time for Ringo. Time takes time for Ringo. I don't know if I said that.
Okay. Yep. There you go. Yeah. Go ahead, Ken.
There's a difference between classic, as far as public perception of what a classic is, which requires familiarity from the public of certain songs and all, and just classic in terms of what we think is really strong material. I mean, the general public doesn't know Time Takes Time. We do. We think it's a classic. Okay. But to the general public, the Ringo album is a classic.
Right. That's why, well, in that case, I say Time Takes Time. I guess more for me,
Yeah.
Where Ringo in the public eye, it's the only classic in the public eye, I think.
Yeah.
I don't.
But there is a
Unfortunate.
difference there.
Yeah. Okay, Ed, Call Me Mr. Broadstreet, thank you very much for your question. And please check out Call Me Mr. Broadstreet's YouTube channel. He's a lot of fun and he's a good guy. Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Ed. Now, Susan.
Yay, Susan.
Can you unmute? There you
I
go.
have to unmute myself.
Yes, there you
you're
go.
good.
Good to see you, Susan. And
Hello, Susan.
And what is your question?
Okay, this is an easy one.
Oh, thank you.
I'm
first. I'm first.
Oh, come on.
all of the solo Beatles had other members of the solo Beatles on some of their recordings.
Yeah.
So from each one of you, which is your favorite solo Beatles studio recording with another or more than one solo Beatle on it?
Wow. We can just pick one.
Yep, just pick one.
Well, I'm going to go because I was, looking up because there's only really two solo Beatles songs that feature three of the solo Beatles, and I just think I'm the Greatest is special, and I just love that it was written by John and given to Ringo. I love the lineup on that one, and I'm going to. And there's other great ones. Let me tell you, other great ones, but this one was special. Klaus on bass as well. I just think, and we talked about Fly on the Wall, right? That would have been a wonderful opportunity to be a fly on the wall for that session right there for that song. So I'm going to go with that one. All right, Kit.
Well, this is kind of a weird one because it's about one of the other Beatles, but How Do You Sleep?
How? Take my pick.
Sorry, Joe. But George on that slide guitar, that nasty slide guitar. Oh my God. It's so good. And I know it's a song, a diss against Paul, but what a diss. That's one of the best diss songs ever. So I think, John's voice is great on that, but George's slide guitar just brought it home. Just a great performance.
Okay, Joe?
Well, the first thing that popped in my head was I'm the Greatest, but I'm thinking a little more if you have more time. And I'm thinking of like Back Off Boogaloo. I love George's guitar on there. I think that's one of the best guitars playing I've ever heard from George on that track. Well, then I settled within my mind, I'm going to shock them all. I'll go with How Do You Sleep? Because, being a John guy, I'm all for guy. I like them all. But, even the best of friends have their rows and their feuds at times, So this was just a period where the two of them were having a little squabble, and you had too many people, of course, where Paul was taking some digs at John. John came back with How Do You Sleep? What I like about George, besides the wonderful playing slide guitar that he does on it, I like the idea that he's on John's side with this. I'm going to play on this. It's a dig at Paul, and I'm with you on it. I kind of like that too. And I say, but it's just for the moment. Everybody don't have to get bent out of shape. It's just that for the moment. They were all good friends. They all loved each other, and it came back. But for that moment, they were having a tough time, and I think I like that. Spices up the story a little bit just for that moment in time, and then later on, it became good.
Okay,
they patched things up.
Yeah. And then George even said, at the acceptance speech for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we all love him, John, very much. We all love Paul very much. He said,
right.
1988. Come on,
Very true. Okay, Ken.
Boy, I wish we could do one for each Beatle here, but
Right.
I would have.
But if you wanted to,
sneak them in like I do.
You want me to?
Sure.
Sneak them in if you can.
Ringo with a Beatle, I would probably on a Ringo record, I'd have to go. Oh God, this is tough now. I put myself on the spot here.
Yeah, you did.
I've always said 6 O'Clock is the best song any of the Beatles wrote for Ringo. So the two of them together on that record, I love a lot. But then Photograph is the best, probably the best single that Ringo's done in his solo career, as much as I love the rest of his catalog. And George and Ringo wrote the song together. So I'd have to give a tie there. John, probably it's got to be How Do You Sleep? George's stinging guitar work on there is just incredible. Sometimes George's slide guitar work is, some of his best work is what he does for other people, not just on his own records. Let's see, Paul. Well, Paul only worked with Ringo.
Right.
So probably Beautiful Night.
Okay.
Such a great song there, and I love Ringo adding his vocals towards the end. Very simple, but perfect drumming on that. George is kind of tough because you want to pick songs that Ringo played on, and I still don't know on All Things Must Pass a breakdown of every single song and which one is Ringo and which is and all that. It's easy to go with something like maybe When We Was Fab, where you know it's Ringo on drums. So maybe those will be my choices.
Okay.
But I wish I knew with All Things Must Pass, like a lot of people, every single song what the lineup was.
All good choices. Thank you, guys.
Susan, thank you. Thank you very much. It's great seeing you. And as always,
Yeah.
we appreciate your support for all of our channels as well.
Ah,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Susan when she's at home.
Okay. All right. I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to go, Adam, hold your horses. I know Night Rainbow was here right at the beginning, so I'm going to go with Night Rainbow first. Okay. So Night Rainbow, you there, my friend? No, you just muted yourself.
Yep.
Unmute
Oh,
yourself.
yep. Yep, there you go.
There you go.
Yes. Thank you.
How you
thank
doing?
you. I'm fabulous. I love your show.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
being here.
Wow. I was on episode 23 at Fest for Beatles fans. with
Oh,
Mark
yeah.
Wilson
Oh, yes.
and Kit, and yes, it was. And later that day, I won Beatles trivia and making me the COVID king, which is the longest running champion in history because it was no more.
Oh, man.
So my question is about the guests at the fest, and what's your favorite that you've seen and favorite that you haven't seen, if you know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Well, Kit,
that's a
you're
good one.
first. You're first up.
Oh, I know. One of my favorites was when Jerry Marsden performed, I think it was in 2007, and he did a kind of an unplugged set. It was just such a pleasure to see him perform, just him on the guitar. And when he sang Ferry Across the Mersey, I choked up. I mean, because he sounded wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And Don't Let the Sun Catch You Crying. I'll never. Annie, were you there that year? Yeah. It was just an experience I'll never forget. I mean, it was just such a kind of intimate performance, and you just remember, drove home how wonderful those songs are and how timeless they are. That was a memory I will never ever forget.
It wasn't Jeff Emmerich's manager?
No, it's not. That's a whole other story. And the other one I mentioned, Astrid, with the first year Astrid came. Wow. And she came a few times, and I'll never forget the first time she walked in to the main ballroom after she was introduced, and she looked exactly, I mean, like her hair was the same. She was dressed in all black. I mean, it's exactly how you would picture her. I mean, and the whole room went silent. I mean, you could hear a pin drop when she walked in.
Amazing.
I mean, it was just that was another moment. I mean, it was almost like a collective gasp. We couldn't believe she was actually there. I mean, yeah. I mean, those were the two that I remember the most. So
great picks there, Kid. Joe, you've got a long history with the fest, right?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, narrowing it down. I think Harry Nilsson was a big deal to see Harry Nilsson there in 1982. Getting to talk with him and get his autograph, and that was a thrill. But I also, I don't know how people are going to take it. I thought this was great. Victor Spinetti. I loved seeing Victor Spinetti because I mean I love movies. I'm a movie buff too, and is this the mad doctor, so to speak, in Help, and the TV director with the sweater in A Hard Day's Night, and the drill sergeant Magical Mystery Tour, and oh, he was so much fun. He had so many good stories to tell. So yeah, those are the ones that came to mind. I've seen a bunch of people. I mean, there are people I wish I could have seen. I wish I could have gone to see Mal Evans when he was there. I didn't see him. You know, that would have been terrific. Billy Preston, I'm sorry I missed. But I know that there's a couple that I wish they would try to get. I'm sure the Petersons have probably gone through the whole list. I don't think they haven't thought of every name. There must be reasons. But I always think Jim Keltner. I wish Jim Keltner would come there. That would be cool. And Julian. You know, Julian would be nice to see.
One of any of the sons or daughters, you know, that would be.
Yeah, oh yeah, whatever, yeah, anybody. Mary, Sean, you know.
Oh, there you go.
Zach.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Ken, you've also got a long history with the fest. You have seen so many amazing, you know, people there. You know.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to pick my favorite. I would just I'd have to name a few, but it was really special to see Peter and Gordon. They reunited, which you know, I was there when Peter and Gordon reunited at BB King's Club. That was the first time that they performed in something like 36 years, and that was for a benefit for Mike Smith of the Dave Clark Five, and that was great. But then they also did a whole set at the fest. Neil Innes, what a hoot. What a great sense of humor, talking about the Ruddles, the Bonzo Dog Band, all that. Great sense of humor, very funny. Did Ruddles material with Liverpool, all that stuff. You mentioned Astrid. What about Klaus Vormann? I mean, Klaus Vormann is
a
guy with such class. He can tell you stories. I mean, he goes back to the early years in Hamburg and all through all the solo music that he played on, you know, doing the artwork for Revolver and the Beatles anthology. There's so many things he can talk about. And, you know, you need hours with someone like him. And he gave an interview where he just talked about the Plastic Ono Band album. And that alone you can talk a lot about. So there's so many special ones. All the Wings members, you know, Lawrence Juber has always been fantastic. Denny Sywell, people like that, Steve Holly, Denny Lane. Those are amongst the best. I never did get to see Mel Evans. Like Joe said, I would have loved to have been there. I'm not quite sure if Jim Keltner was ever there. He would be the one person I would like to see more than anyone if he's never been there. And even still, if he was there once, I'd love to have him back because he's been on so much solo music from the Beatles. He's got stories to tell. So I guess that's it.
Cool. Well, you know, since I was just attended my first fest earlier this year, I mean, I gotta say, I mean, that acoustic set that Juber did was just phenomenal. And I'll even include the, you know, because I was at the White Album Symposium as well back in 18, and how Lewison does his presentations is just jaw-dropping. The work and detail that are in his presentations, no matter what it's on, whether or not they're walking the street or, you know, talking to an apple scrub. I mean, just the detail and that goes into his presentations are fantastic. So those are amazing. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to any musician that has worked on any solo Beatles recording, you know, just to hear their thoughts on working with any four of them would be great, whether it's Keltner or, you know, anybody that worked with them. I would love that opportunity Steve Gadd, and there's just hundreds of musicians that I would love. Maybe they did try to get them, maybe they refused, I don't know, but maybe it's time for a solo Beatles convention, huh? What do you guys think?
There you go.
You put it all into one.
Yeah. But Night Rainbow, thank you very much for that question. That was a great question.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for keep going.
Thank
will.
you. We will. We will.
Yep. All right, Adam. Go
What do
ahead
you
and
got against the ladies? You had one lady.
well, unfortunately, they showed up. They're fashionably
No, there's
late.
one coming. There's one other. Yep, we're good. No, we
the
got more.
21st century,
Yeah. Well, all right, Adam, go ahead, buddy. How you doing?
Thank you. Oh, I'm doing all right. All things considered, right? Thank you for having me on, and I'm
Adam.
very honored to have been at the 50th one from last time you guys did the 50th, and I hope you guys make it to 1,000.
Oh, thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Adam, just one question now, Adam.
Okay,
we're
one is
teasing,
a really quick question, so it's hard for me. I'm trying to tie in the quick question with the other question, but if I have to do one question, I guess I'll do the complicated question.
Oh boy. Joe's first too. Joe's first.
Yeah,
okay,
right. All right, I'll say pass
Joe,
then if I don't know.
First, here's my complicated one and only question for you each. If you could choose one of the Beatles solo films, like whether it be a documentary or a biopic, and have it be preserved and studied and saved and shown for generations and years to come, for more Beatles fans, versus or the Hard Day's Night film, which would you prefer, a solo Beatles film to be studied and preserved for years to come, or a Hard Day's Night?
Now you made it easy. It was a little hard at first. Now it's pretty easy. Hard Day's Night, but yeah.
For
Hard
each,
Day's
you guys might have different.
But
answers,
if I'm gonna pick a solo one though too, how about I do that?
Yeah.
I'm thinking as you're asking this, I'm thinking of all the solo projects,
right.
and,
Yeah.
and I don't know why I'm thinking. Imagine John Lennon.
Yeah.
1988 film. Andrew Salt.
Okay. All right, Ken Michaels.
This is tough because A Hard Day's Night is such a classic. How can you throw, I don't know, Casablanca versus something,
Right.
Yeah.
I wish that there was a really, really great documentary solo wise. I am pleased with most of the Lennon ones. I do like Imagine John Lennon. I liked Above Us Only Sky. I like Give Me Some Truth, although there's overlap between Give Me Some Truth and Above Us Only Sky. I'm not pleased with most of what Paul has done. Never been happy with Wingspan.
No.
And Living in the Material World is an okay documentary, but it jumps from 1974 right to John killed Traveling Wilburys. I mean,
they miss a lot of George
all
in there.
those years. So it has its faults, but up until through 1974, it's very good. And there's never been anything on Ringo, really. So I'd probably say, because A Hard Day's Night is so perfect, nothing could ever compete with that, except maybe Help. I actually like Help more than A Hard Day's Night, but you'd probably go with the fact that because there hasn't been the most outstanding solo documentary.
Right.
It'd be great if there could be one combining all four, but that would take so many hours to put together.
Right.
And when you're dealing with, even with someone who led a short life like John, there's so much to talk about there that it takes hours and hours. I kind of wish that they had handled Living in the Material World just from George's solo career on, and not cover the
right.
Try to do all that, in 2.5 hours. That could have been great. But given the choices of what we've had already, even though I'm Mr. Solo Beatle, I'm going to go with A Hard Day's Night.
Yeah, I thought for a minute you might pick, I don't know. I'm glad you didn't say John and Yoko, A Love Story.
Now, Adam, is this including films that they acted in as well, or just documentaries?
Yes. No, all of it.
All of it. Okay, well that changes because
So
obviously
all of it.
you pick hard. I mean, obviously, Hard Day's Night is the one you want to
Preserve and study. Yeah.
But I mean, if I was to pick one from the solo years, maybe I'd pick That'll Be the Day. The film Ringo was a co-star in, just because that period was so important to the Beatles. I mean, that's when the music came out that inspired them to be the artists that they became. So maybe I'd pick that. So Kit.
Yeah, I'd also throw in the Imagine the John and Yoko film, because that was a visual album, and today there are visual albums done, and before that, but that was maybe not the first, but it was one of the early ones. And so, I mean, you can study it on that level. You can, study it certainly on an artistic level. So I would say that one would be worth studying, and from music video level as well, of course. I mean, those are. But you've got to, though. I mean, you have to preserve Hard Day's Night. Study that.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And don't forget Magical Mystery Tour. Being studied. Paul says, that was a film.
People like Spielberg.
We really took notice of. That was like a film. Yeah. Okay. What not to do? Come on.
I was going to say, here's how not.
Yeah.
No, but I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I enjoy it as a timepiece.
Exactly.
What was that, Ken?
I think that because it had such a free-form aspect to it, it was influential.
Yeah.
In its own way. You can't put Magical Mystery Tour in the same category as A Hard Day's Night and Help. They're different films, completely different approaches.
Right.
It's like you can't put Let It Be in the
different substances.
Yeah. So, if you want to look at it as a string of videos for each song, it works in that level. But to people who really study film and avant-garde film and experimental stuff, they can point to a movie like that as being influential. It has been studied on college campuses.
Right.
So Scorsese, I think, that praised the film and recognized it. I don't think it was Spielberg. I'm not sure.
Okay, Adam. Thank you very much, buddy.
Thank you, Adam.
Good seeing you. Good seeing you.
Thank you. You too.
All right. We're moving on. Yep. Thank you. All right, moving on to Joanne. Hello.
Hi, Joanne.
You got to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello.
Hey.
I didn't know I was coming up. Nice to see you guys.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah. I had a couple of different questions, but I'll just stick with one. George Harrison was always my favorite, my second favorite, I must say. Paul comes first always, since I was 14 and I was in Shea Stadium.
Wow.
But I wonder, I'd like this question to go to each of you. If you can think of a time when George actually enjoyed being a Beatle.
That's a very good question. I like that.
Ken, we're starting with you on that one.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
I have one.
I think that in the very beginning, when they were really experiencing success, global success, he liked it. He grew tired of it very quickly, but he liked the aspect of the fame and certainly making the money. And then he realized that there's more to life than just that. But I think he also enjoyed, just when he got into meditation with the Maharishi, he found, something there that gave his life more fulfillment, even though that was more of an individual thing. Because, depending upon, I think John was somewhat into the meditation. Paul has said through the years, he appreciated what he learned from that. But I think as an individual, once he started getting into meditation and spirituality, he enjoyed his life from that aspect. But he also saw the frustrations in being in a band with two of the greatest songwriters of all time.
Right.
And so he had to deal with that, while at the same time trying to have, his individual happiness, which I think he achieved through spirituality and meditation. So I think once he started getting into that aspect of it on his own, he was becoming happy, but he still had to deal with all this other stuff while he loved the other Beatles and being in the band. But I think in the very beginning, when the Beatles were successful, I think he did enjoy it.
Right. Yeah, I think there's the period, if you watch Living in the Material World, I mean, you see the postcard that I think Danny reads that he sends to his mom about how Brian made it to where, all, him, Paul and George, or Paul and John were going to be equals when it comes to singing. And I think when you hear or see that telegram, I mean, he looks very excited and very happy about that. So, I mean, that might be a time where he found himself very happy, because then he's considered an equal with Paul and John. Happy and otherwise, I mean, I just don't necessarily see a lot of happiness, maybe, while they're during the pop marijuana days, during the making, you hear about all the fun they had during the making of Help. Obviously he had to have been happy there. Maybe even during the recording of A Hard Day's Night, they look like all of them are having a great time and they're happy. So to just pinpoint one time, I think is kind of tough. But I think when you see that Living in the Material documentary, and you see the postcards that he's sending home, and he's talking about being able to sing the same amount of songs as John and Paul were able to do, I think that shows that he was happy about being a Beatle. Myself, Kit.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, going back to the anthology documentary, as I remember, there was a scene where he was talking about in the early years of the Beatles and Beatlemania, even the early years, he talked about how tight they were. Right. And he seemed to, have very fond memories of that. And when they were on their off days when they were touring, and again, I'm talking about the early years of Beatlemania, when they showed home video of them, lounging around a pool and then go-karts and stuff like that. And it seemed like those days he enjoyed before it got completely out of control. But also I was thinking about, obviously the Get Back sessions, there were filled with drama and all, but as we saw in the documentary, there were moments, those where he seemed to be having some fun. I mean, and it was when he was working, when he was composing, like when he was working on, Old Brown Shoe and, stuff like that. I think, I Me Mine. And I don't, he just seemed to be having fun. And of course, helping out Ringo with Octopus's Garden. I mean, the way he kind of beamed when he was working it. So there were these moments where you could see kind of, the old sort of fun that he had. And it was when he was creating, and then of course, then some of the business stuff would come back. But so I think it was definitely the early years, but I there were probably moments even, in the bad times, as I said, when it came to creating and all that, he still, had fun. But, probably as time went on, they may have been a little more few and far between, shall we say.
All right, Joe.
Well, I didn't want to go last in this one because I had one that popped right into my head, and I was hoping nobody took it. Nobody did. Ed Sullivan, when they first on the Ed Sullivan show, George in particular, to me, seems to be they all seem to be thrilled with it, having a good time, the beginning of stardom in America. And there's a moment, especially when they're doing, I think it's She Loves You. I don't know how much people know frame by frame, how many times they've seen this, where John and George kind of look over to each other when they're singing one of the lines. And there's a pause for a moment. John looks over and George gives him a knowing smile, as if to say, like, yeah, we made it, kind of thing. I get goosebumps thinking about that. And it's a moment. I look at that She Loves You sometime and watch that moment. I think Tony was sending messages here, I think, saying, oh, George wasn't happy in concert. I don't know about that. Some of the early ones, Shea Stadium, he seems to be having a blast, at least with John when they're doing I'm Down anyway, if nothing else, at the organ, electric organ. But yeah, right away I thought of like the Ed Sullivan show. But if you were going to ask me just to throw this in, what was some of George's happiest moments performing, period. It's the Carl Perkins special from 1985.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was happy then.
Absolutely. All right, cool. Thank you, Joe. Joanne, great question. Thank you very much for being here and supporting Talk More Talk. Appreciate it.
Oh, glad to be here. Thank you.
All right, take care. We're going to move to George next. I'm sure that's not the real name.
Yep. Oh, yeah, no, I think.
Oh, is it your real name? You got to unmute yourself.
Unmute.
Yep.
Real name is Georgiana. I've been called George all my life.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
Georgiana,
Yes.
thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
I'm glad you got that right, Tom.
Yes.
You said it's not your real name, I'm sure. Yes, it is.
And again, I just want to mention that George is a very special guest because she is a good friend was a good friend of Mel Evans and has really been working to keep his memory alive and has been helping with Ken's upcoming book. So she is a really honored guest tonight. I was thrilled to meet her at the Chicago Fest. She's become a good friend. So I'm so glad that you're here. So thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you. Now give us your hardest Mel Evans question you got.
I actually was going to do a Mel Evans, but I thought, no, Ken might say, wait a minute.
Maxwell Silverhammer. That's my favorite Mel Evans contribution.
Actually, my question is about covers.
Okay.
Because early on, as a Beatles fan from the very beginning, I loved it that they covered so many artists and did a really good job. I sort of had a three-pronged question, but maybe we'll narrow it down. And you have to think if it were possible, obviously with two of our beloved Beatles gone. I asked this a lot of my friends, and I have it in three parts here. What song, current, or even in the past, would you have liked to hear the Beatles sing either solo or as a group? And, the first thing that popped up in our recent conversations with a friend of mine was, I would love to have heard John sing Until I Found You by Sanchez, which I think is absolutely a fantastic song to begin with. So is there a song that you would have liked to hear them cover? What is the best song that they covered? What is the worst song that they covered?
Oh, wow. And I'm first. Thanks.
Go for it, Tom.
The favorite song that they covered as a group. There's everybody's trying to be my baby is one that I enjoy. Words of Love is one that I enjoy. That I really don't care for.
I know what you're gonna say.
Well, listen. Say what you want about Twist and Shout. There's times listen. No, I don't get me wrong. It's one of the greatest vocal performances ever. Okay. However, there's times where I just don't want to hear it. We know it's great. There's just times where, unfortunately there's that fatigue word that sometimes it just happens. I would have loved to hear them cover anything that's has a lot of harmonies to it. I think, like a Crosby, Stills and Nash song, maybe even James Taylor song. If they were to continue into the 70s as an act, I can see them maybe covering Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, just me. Because a lot of these artists, they either admired or ended up working with. So for me, I would like to have seen them covers a band that had a lot of harmonies in their repertoire. So that would be me, and then Kit, going on to you.
Well, me, I love their R&B covers. They just really knew how to do it. Hard to pick one. I did love their cover of Money. John, just his vocals on that were just incredible. So I love their cover of Money. will say, and I'm probably going to have a lot of virtual tomatoes thrown at me for this, I wasn't crazy about their cover of rock and roll music. I thought, I don't know, there was just something a little flat there. Like it could have used a little more energy. I don't know what it is.
Energy.
I don't know what it is. I don't know. It just somehow. I mean,
If it has one thing, it's energy.
I don't know. It's not that they don't have energy. It's just the quality of the recording. I don't know what it is. I mean, Chuck Berry is hard to top. I mean, let's put it that way. And that is, yeah. Tony said, would I prefer a live version of rock and roll music? Maybe, maybe that's something that it would be improved live, and that the studio just sounded a little, just a little flat to me. I don't know what it is. What would I like them to cover? I would have liked them to maybe try a little more country, because I mean, I loved Act Naturally. I thought they did such a fantastic job on that. It would be interesting. I mean, I wouldn't expect them to go 100%, country, but I would have liked to have, it'd be interesting to have hear them to delve into a little bit more, just maybe country-ish kind of material. I'm trying to think of a specific example off the top of my head. I mean, kind of, maybe delving into a bit more Buddy Holly or something along that line. Because as I said, I love what they did with Buck Owens. And so it would be interesting to hear what they, could do, with something, more along. I'm blanking out right now on a specific country artist, but I'd like to hear them. Would like to hear them do a little more in that vein, just to be a little different.
Maybe a little Hank.
Yeah, there you go, little Hank.
Yeah,
little Johnny Cash.
Yes. Okay, Joe, you're next.
All right. Well, for the best, I thought of right away of Money. John, the way he wails away money, and you believe every word of it. He wants that money. I mean, it's like a. I mean, I get goosebumps every time I hear that version by them. The stereo version in that one I like better than the mono version.
Mm-hmm.
But I also Twist and Shout, but that's a little. We call it fatigue factor. We hear that a lot on the radio, Twist and Shout, but that's such a great performance. One take, John at the end of the session with his vocal cords shredded. He can't do it. He tried another take after that, but his voice couldn't do it. It was shot. I mean, but I'm giving more than one, but Money is number one. But I also wanted to mention Words of Love, because even though I really love Buddy Holly, what a shame, what a waste losing him. But as much as I love Buddy Holly's music, I think that I like the Beatles' Words of Love better than Buddy Holly's Words of Love, to tell you the truth. So I wanted to mention that. Then when I was thinking of the worst cover that the Beatles did, I was going through all of them, and I think, no, they're all just as good as the originals, if not better, in some cases. And then I thought of Mr. Moonlight, which is a cover. And I don't know the original Mr. Moonlight.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm one of those people. I'm sorry?
Dr. Feelgood and the Interns.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not somebody who hates I'm not somebody who hates Mr. Moonlight. I enjoy it, the Beatles version. But that's probably the least that I can think of favorite of that. And then I was really, really racking my brain to think of a song that I wish the Beatles had tried. And I was thinking, they never really did an Elvis song. When I say that, I mean on their regular albums, the Beatles, I'm thinking, what Elvis song? I Want You, I Need You, I Love You. Can I see Paul trying to do that? Maybe that came to mind, and maybe John doing Rave On. Buddy Holly.
Okay.
There you go.
Mr. Michaels?
Of the stuff that they released for EMI, it's a toss-up. My favorite is either. I love Bad Boy.
Yes.
I think that John's vocals on all these songs, especially Twist and Shout, Money, all these songs are just so great. Such an earthy R&B feel to it all. And it's the archetype. I can never pronounce that word. Archetypal
There you go.
rock and roll song. And the whole arrangement is just so great. I love Bad Boy and I love rock and roll music. I think there's so much energy on the Beatles version. And as much as I love and admire Chuck Berry, I think the Beatles version is far superior in rock and roll music. And I even think Roll Over Beethoven as well. But those are my top two. I have to give a shout out to some of the BBC recordings that they did, because since I love the Beatles harmonies, and you mentioned Words of Love here, To Know Her is to Love Her. What a gem that is, the BBC recording of that. I love the 3-part harmony on that song. And Soldier of Love is such a great cover right there. Arthur Alexander's song. Nothing Shaken But the Leaves on the Trees, I love a lot. Least favorite, I always liked it. I mean, I like all the covers, but probably the one I like the least at this point is maybe A Taste of Honey. Never in the mood to really hear the song, but when I do, I enjoy it. But there's always got to be one at the bottom there that you like the least, and that would be it.
I always seem to go to Herb Albert's version of Taste of Honey. Love that version.
That's a classic.
It is. Yes. It sure is.
Can I say one thing about that? Because my whole childhood, I played the trumpet, and I listened to Herb Alpert almost as much as I listened to the Beatles. And I played along to his version of A Taste of Honey. And for many years, I never knew it was the same song that the Beatles did. Seriously, because his arrangement was so radically different from what the Beatles did. And that's the brilliance of that recording.
Right.
The arrangements on Herb Alpert's records.
Yeah.
But it's a quirky thing with me. Sometimes I think about songs that Ringo could cover, and he's so good at doing 50s and 60s songs. I think this is actually early 70s, but My Pledge of Love from the Joe Jeffrey Group, you know that song, really would fit Ringo's range and his energy and his style. And it's kind of ironic, he did an album that didn't get released, that Chips Moment produced, and on there he covers I Can Help.
Yeah.
That's perfect for Ringo.
Yeah.
Which so many years later, after that song was a hit, people said to me, "Don't you think that sounds like Ringo?" And I said, "No, it doesn't." And now when I hear Billy Swan, I think of Ringo.
Me too.
And if he did a better version, he wasn't in good shape during the Chips Moment sessions, having his alcohol problems. But if he really did a very good version of that, it'd probably be pretty close to Billy Swan's version, I would think. But I'd like to hear him tackle that. And just like Joe said, it's kind of ironic how much the Beatles admired Elvis Presley, but when it came to their EMI catalog, they didn't cover him. They did his music live. They did some of it for BBC Radio. That's all right.
Maybe they were afraid to. Maybe they were kind of too much in awe of him in that point in the early Elvis. I mean,
Yeah, but I would have loved to have heard more of the 50s Elvis from the Beatles.
Right.
And certainly the one you mentioned, Joe, I Want You, I Need You.
Yeah, I was trying to think, all the songs, which one would be good. It's hard.
Excellent. Watching that country documentary by Ken Burns, you were talking about Waylon Jennings. I didn't know that he was part of Buddy Holly's band and was, he could have been on that plane as well.
Yes.
With them. So fascinating story there. George, thank you very much for being
welcome.
here.
Thank you for being here.
I just have to say to all four of you, I'm very surprised that not one of you listed Long Tall Sally as a good cover. That's probably my favorite.
Oh, that's a great cover.
Oh yeah,
too.
Sure, absolutely.
That's one that's hard to pick.
That's the thing about these questions is putting it on the spot. Some things get forgotten. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny? I have a lamp here, a Beatles lamp, and it has all the UK albums on it. And I'm going through the albums covers, and they don't have the long. It doesn't have the Long Tall Sally EP on it, so I didn't think of it.
That's hilarious.
Oh,
I look forward to your involvement with the book and what you have participate or gave to Ken Womack for that really cannot wait for this release. We all are just foaming at the mouth for this release. We're looking forward to it. So thank you for participating. Really
Well,
appreciate it.
I always shout out to Peter Hicks. He's the one that contacted me and convinced me to get that out of your box that's been there for 55 years and share it. So, so I did, and Ken's the right person to have it. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Yes. All right, we're going to go with Annie from Chicago next. What's going on?
Greetings, one and all. Happy
Hi.
to be with you all.
Hello.
So I kind of lost the train of thought of my own question because you guys all covered all the questions really, 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 really well. But I think I just want to ask maybe a more Chicago-based question, if I could. In that, do you think, do you think that Chicago had as much of an influence on the Beatles, maybe second to New York, maybe a little bit more than LA? What are your thoughts about the Chicago influence on the Beatles?
Well, that's perfect because Kit is first.
Well, I mean, obviously not quite, not as obviously as much as New York, but I think certainly, musically, you have the blues, even though Rolling Stones have the much bigger, that's more obvious than the Beatles. Although you do have Chess Records, which had a number of R&B artists that influenced the Beatles, so you do have that connection. And then you have, Chicago was also the site of where John gave his kind of sort of apology for the Beatles are bigger than Jesus comment. And I'm trying to remember the name of the hotel. It doesn't exist anymore. But I'm blanking out on the name of it. But that took place in Chicago. And I think, and then, this isn't Chicago, but of course, George's sister lived in the way out in Benton, Illinois, and actually was George was the first person to set foot in the States because of that, and visited his sister in Benton. And so she has often said she kind of helped the Beatles break in the States by, helping him get some of their records to local radio stations. I'm sure many of you have heard that story. And so in some ways, Chicago / Illinois did play a part. Oh, and Dick Biondi. Dick Biondi was one of the DJs who, for a while, there was a story that he was the first one. That's not true. He was one of the earliest, though, disc jockeys who played the Beatles records in the States. He is still with us. Unfortunately, he's not on the radio anymore. I've heard. I don't think he's doing very well health-wise, but he's a legend here in Chicago, and so that's another connection. So, there are some, they're not as obvious as New York, but definitely there are some. And those who have taken my classes, such as Mark, know that Chicago has many music connections. And so with the Beatles, it's not quite as obvious, but definitely when it comes to blues and soul, they're there and they influence the Beatles, no doubt about it.
Okay, Joe.
I'm so glad that Kit went first and not me. I'm totally lost. I don't know. I wish I could say something. I'm thinking of the group Chicago, trying to say
Also awesome.
Can I try to weasel out of it by coming up with the group Chicago? I really haven't. Other than Louise Harrison, I'm lost. I really didn't know how to answer that. I'm sorry.
Ken?
Anybody else?
It's kind of hard to top what Kit just said, but I thank you for mentioning Dick Biondi, because VJ Records was out of Chicago.
Another connection.
And for that reason,
WLS,
WLS, their top 40 radio station, Dick was on, and they were among the first to play Please Please Me, and it made their top 40 charts. The kid said it's kind of been proven he may not have been the first to play the Beatles, but he was certainly one of the first. And mentioning chess records as you did.
There you go. Someone's holding up a WLS charts there. There you go. Thanks, Annie.
And Paul likes the song Chicago. Chicago, Chicago. He sung that a few times. That's about all that I would know on this topic.
Well, what we need is Annie to write a Beatles in Chicago book. And, and there's she's got the research right there. And I'll be first in line to buy it.
And Annie, we've got to get these guys to come to the Beatle Fest in Chicago next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just say I've been going to the fest since 1979.
Wow.
Hence a lot that you see behind me are things from the fest. You've got to come to Chicago. If you've gone to New York, it's awesome. If you've gone to LA, if you've gone to Vegas, I've gone to all of those. It's a different kind of feel in Chicago.
Right.
It's really interesting. If you've gone to a fest in one place, go to another fest in another place.
Yeah.
You get a different vibe altogether. Hey guys, thanks so much. It was great.
Thank you very much,
Annie.
Annie.
Thank you, Annie. It's so good seeing you.
One of my big regrets for living in Chicago for 6 years was never going to a fest.
Yeah.
There, you know,
we got to come back.
Well, you know, as a chef, you're really frowned upon on taking weekends off. You know,
right.
so
that's right.
But whatever, I'll get there. I will get to a Chicago Fest. I'm looking forward to meeting you there, Annie. Thank you for your question. Thank you for being here. And we're going to end this Rack Our Brains with the one and only Robert S. Robert, my friend.
Hey, you made it. You made it.
And
Yes, thank you.
recently in the presence of a ex-Beatle, Pete Best, and you did a fantastic job with your video, Robert. What is your
Thank you.
question, my friend?
Well, first off, I'd like to say congratulations to Kit, Ken, Tom, and Joe for 100 shows.
Thank you.
A special thank you to Kit for going the extra mile to make sure that I can get on here today.
No
The
problem,
11th,
Robert.
actually the 12th hour. 'Cause it
No
was after
problem.
9 o'clock, so I appreciate it. My question, I know we're running out of time, so I'll make it quick.
No worries.
The solo Beatles, as you know, collaborated and or performed with other musicians. You know, John with David Bowie and Paul with Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson and so on. Is there a particular collaboration that you would have liked to have seen? Just pick one Beatle.
Oh, I have that.
All right. Well,
Like, for
Joe,
example,
you're
Tom,
first.
I'll tell you something. Tom, you mentioned Neil Young earlier,
Mhm.
and that's actually half of my answer.
Okay.
As odd as it may sound, I would have liked to have heard John and Neil do a song together.
Interesting. Okay, Joe, you're first on this one.
Well, I've never, I can't believe it, seen Elton John. I wish I would have went to the Elton John concert in 1974. I had no clue whatsoever that John Lennon was going to show up, and had him join Elton on stage Thanksgiving night in 74. I mean, if you talk about that kind of a collaboration, I mean, does that count, or you want,
I guess what I was asking is an artist that they did not collaborate with, that they would have done a song with, some songs.
Well, I mean, I could go solo. I mean, I've often wondered why Paul, if this counts again, Paul Simon, with John or Paul, and I also was wondering why Dylan and Paul have never tried something together. I'd love to, but I'd like to see them collaborate. Bob Dylan, maybe, I don't know, write the words. I don't know. And Paul write a melody. I would love to see that. I don't know why that's never happened.
And these days, who would sing it?
Oh,
just kidding.
Ringo.
Wow, Robert. Wow.
Oh,
okay.
Ringo still sounds like Ringo.
Ken,
let Ringo sing it.
Ken, how about you?
There's so many people, but it's a little complicated because you mentioned Elton John, who I have the greatest admiration for. Yes, John Lennon worked with him. Ringo worked with Elton, but they never wrote anything with Elton. I wouldn't have minded hearing John Lennon try to write a song with Elton John, or Paul McCartney try to write a song with Elton John. I would like to mention, even though, yes, Paul wrote one song with Stevie Wonder, that's not enough. I mean, really, seriously, collaborate together. And Paul Simon is another one. And you know what? Paul Simon with John, Paul Simon with Paul Simon with George Harrison. I would have given for anything. When you heard George Harrison work with Paul Simon on Saturday Night Live, how they sounded together, they would have been so natural together. And you know that John and Paul admired Paul Simon so much. I still wish Paul McCartney would work with Paul Simon. They're two of the greatest songwriters ever. I think that could work. And I think John Lennon, when he was alive, working with Paul Simon, I would have welcomed. But there's way too many. But Prince is also another one that I thought about with Paul, because he would have really given Paul more of a kick and an edge in his music. You know, Prince is very fearless. You know, he did whatever the hell he wanted. Paul does too, in his own way. But sometimes, you know, Paul needs
that would be an interesting combination.
Yeah, I wish you know, when Prince was alive, that he had worked with Paul.
Right. You know, we had done a show on this a while back where we talked about, you know, acts that we would love to see the Fabs work with. You know, I'm going to stick with, I would love to see Paul work with the ABBA girls. You know, just to see them do something together. They're like in the, you know, late 70s, early 80s. I think that their voices would have gelled together nicely. Neil Young, like you said, Robert, I think whether it's John, Paul, both of them, I think would have worked nicely with Neil Young. And actually, Neil Diamond, I think would do something good with Paul. Myself, you know, that's just a few for me.
So no Olivia Ringo combo.
No. You never know. Stranger things have happened, right? So Kit.
Yeah, I'll just throw in you've all mentioned ones that I completely agree with. I'll just throw in a couple more for Paul. Back when he was still writing songs, all Billy Joel. I would have loved to have heard him do something with Paul. That, I mean, I think that would have been a natural for them to collaborate. And I've mentioned this before. This is well, they have kind of collaborated already, but I've always thought Paul and Beck could do something interesting. And I'm talking about a real, like, you know, because yes, I know we did a remix of Find My Way and it was good. I kind of liked it, but I'd like them to do an actual, like, where they're both on the track actually performing together. Because Paul has mentioned that he's, you know, a big fan of Beck's, and Beck, I just find him a fascinating artist and very versatile. And I think they could do something interesting together. And that remix gave us a little hint of what they could do. So yeah, I think that could be fascinating. So
Okay.
those are my two that I'm throwing in.
Okay, and
Great,
Joe,
thank
you
you.
did this already, right? We started with you, Joe, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I add one more?
Yeah, please.
Barry Gibb.
Very
yeah.
well, absolutely.
Oh,
Come on, the Gibb brothers are among the greatest
Songwriters
ever,
Yeah.
not only for themselves but for other people,
Oh,
and
forget about it.
great melodic songwriters too. And the two of them admire each other, Paul and Barry Gibb. I would have loved to have seen them work together, and still would like to see it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
great answer. Like that.
Yeah. Excellent.
Thank you.
Robert, thank you very much. Appreciate you
question.
being here and you know, supporting the channel. Before we sign off, Ken, you have a little announcement you want to make concerning your website.
Well, two quick announcements. Once in a while, I have a special contest that I do on my website, and I'm giving away this jigsaw puzzle.
What is
It's
that?
called A Magical Mystery Tour of 100 Beatles songs. There's 3,000 pieces.
Wow.
You put them all together and you'll find Beatles songs represented in there. This is from the folks at Aquarius, and also get the name out here, NMR Brands. And I'm doing a special contest on my website starting tomorrow. It runs through October 10th. It all involves writing down the song titles of 4 Beatles songs that I post on my special contest page, one at a time. 3 people will win this. And all they have to do is know the 4 songs, email them to me. And on the 11th of October, those 3 winners will be announced. But really is a tremendous work of art. You take a look, which is hard to do.
They'll win the same puzzle. They'll have to share, they get 1,000 pieces each,
Yes.
or do they
each get 333 pieces?
Okay.
They all have to work together.
Okay.
Great.
3 of these.
Right.
And the other thing is, as I hope all of you know, I have a radio show, Every Little Thing, which has been in syndication for quite a while. It's on over 50 radio stations. On John's birthday, October 9th, there's an oldie station out of Canada, FM 108. They're going to be running the show 24 hours on John's birthday on October the 9th. So if you never heard that show before, give the station a listen. It's fm108.ca, and the entire day, because this show has never been made available until recently on demand. So for those of you who've been curious about this radio show, what it's all about, this is a great opportunity. Any time of the day on October 9th, put on fm108.ca, 24 hours straight. Some of the shows are tributes to John and have thematic sets dedicated to John. So I'm really grateful that they're doing this. The program director's birthday is October 9th. So he's celebrating too.
Excellent. That's awesome. Congratulations on that, Ken. Kit, you want to tell everybody how they can get a hold of us before we sign off?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you all who are right here, those who were here earlier and had to leave early. I mean, all of you, and all of you who are watching out there on YouTube, we couldn't do the show without you. We couldn't get to 100 without you guys and all of your support of all these years. I mean, this just means the world to us that you're here with us celebrating tonight. And also, you can find us, of course, on our Facebook page. You can find us right here on this YouTube channel. And of course, you can please subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new episodes. You can find us on any podcasting service you can think of. You can find us on Twitter at talkmoretalk1, the number 1. You can email us at talkmoresolotalk@gmail.com. Give us your feedback. If you have any episode ideas that you would like to send us, please do. And also want to make sure I thank Beatle Ed, who runs our show and has run it for quite a while, and many of our individual shows as well on fab4radio.com. Thank you for supporting our show. He has been really just been a terrific support for us all these years. And I think that's everything. I think that's everywhere you can find it. Oh, and our website, talkmoretalk.com. So you can find us everywhere.
Okay. Well, that was amazingly 100 episodes in the can. We'll see, I'm sure hopefully we'll get another 100 in, and hopefully you'll all be along for the ride. Like Kit said, we can't do the show without you. We really appreciate all your comments. Every time you've joined a live show or watched the show afterwards, all your support has been really heartfelt. And again, we appreciate everybody out there that has at least listened to us for 5 minutes or our whole show. So that being said, for Kit O'Toole, Ken Michaels, Joe Mayo, Ken Womack, I'm Tom Hunyadi saying just thank you. You guys are the best. And we're the greatest, baby, and you better believe it.